back. So back in Hobart, do you have an idea in your mind at the time what you wanted to do with your life at that stage? I know you had your eye on a career as perhaps as an actor, and you were maybe saw something to do with music in the future. What was the plan getting back to Hobart?
Before I left Sydney, as that 18-year-old, I went to see the Stranglers at the State Theatre. It was...
That'll change your life.
Oh, it did. It was phenomenal. And I heard this sound, and I turned to the guy next to me who was a punk with a full mohawk and all that going on. And I went, what is that sound? And he sneered at me, and I can't blame him really, because it was the crucial sound of the Stranglers. He said, it's the bass guitar.
Yeah. That's the whole thing about them.
And I went, that's what I want to do. I want to play bass. So I got back to Hobart, and I did do some more acting, but it was playing bass guitar that I really wanted to do. I got a job waitressing, of course, because no one was paying me to act or play bass guitar. It was a steep learning curve, but it was one that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun. And I actually became quite popular as a bass player because I was what was described at the time as a naive bass player, which is a nice way of saying I absolutely had no idea what I was doing. So I would come up with different bass lines than most bass players would.
So the only chops that you had were yours and yours alone, perhaps. Because you hadn't had the time to cop everybody else's licks, had you? Yeah. So best thing to do in that instance is to join a band.
Yes. And I did just play around with a couple of different other people, but there was a band in Hobart that was looking for the last member to complete its lineup. Now, I had done a lot of singing, and because I was a chick, I thought, well, they're going to ask me to sing. And
you were already a pretty polished entertainer, having grown up in that environment at church and acting and singing for people and performing for everybody. So no doubt straight away you were able to bring a level of performance that would probably make the rest of the guys in the band go, oh, we're onto something here straight away.
Yes, but it was my actual bass guitar that did the trick.
And it wasn't the technique or those licks that you had of your own, but just the way it looked, wasn't it? But it was a cool bass that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, they ended up wanting a bass guitarist, and I freaked out a little bit because I hadn't actually played in a real band by that stage. But one of the other guys that I had done some music with said, oh, I've got the perfect bass guitar for you. Let's go to the guitar shop. And he bought the guitar and I bought the bass, a matching pair. I wish we still had them. They were called Burns Flights, and very 70s glam rock, metallic green, and shaped like that with a pointy headstock. So they looked like Christmas trees. Really light, sounded dreadful, which I didn't know at the time, until I upgraded to a Fender ages later, which was really heavy and sounded good. But so when I went to audition for this first band, and I went, oh, well, I'm not really a great bass player. But the guitarist said, well, when I put on your bass, let's have a play. I flipped open the case. He took one look at that Burns Flight metallic green Christmas tree of a bass and said, you're in. Before I played a note. I did love that bass. Yes. But I was completely hopeless.
How did you find that world of moving from living in the Cross in Sydney and that crew that you were working with or hanging around with to being in Tasmania, struggling indie bands, trying to write songs, learn their instruments at the same time and maintain a focus on the future?
Oh, I don't think I had a focus on the future. I moved into the share house that the band rehearsed in. It was just, we didn't have a fridge. We didn't have a shower.
This is in Tasmania as well, as not in sunny Queensland.
No, it was amazing. We didn't need a fridge though because the milk would stay fresh because it was so cold in Tassie. And I remember buying a sack of potatoes for us to live on at one stage. Money went on beer and cigarettes and getting to gigs. None of us had a car. We had to get maxi taxi to gigs. And it was just fantastic. I totally loved it.
It's a life like no other, really, isn't it? Sleeping in, playing music all day, all night, jamming all the time. Everybody on the same page, totally committed to this project that we're all in. It's like a world within a big world where you're completely insulated and yet completely self-reliant on each other at the same time.
It's a family.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing, especially later on with bands. They became my family. I didn't feel as I fitted in at all when I was growing up. I never had that real sense of closeness. But certainly, and later on when I was in Sydney and playing in bands and we were touring a lot and putting out CDs, that was my family.
Yeah.
That's where I belonged.
And ultimately, one of the bands that you'd started had achieved the level of success that you were on the road touring. You'd made the move to Sydney with a view that now is the time to think about management and a record company. And this is the band that you've always wanted.
Yep.
The band makes the ultimate commitment that we're going to pick up everything and we're going to move to Sydney to make it big. And the whole thing falls apart almost straight away.
Indeed. And I was very resentful about that for a while because I had given up a lot at that stage to move to Sydney, and my boyfriend at the time didn't want to move to Sydney. He didn't come with me. I'd been offered a contract acting and I was going to be paid to act, and I turned that down, moved to Sydney with this bunch of blokes, and within weeks they'd all just returned back to Hobart after making me all these promises. But I thought, well, I'm here in Sydney now, I'm going to make this work. And I started collecting around me people I liked and trusted. And they changed, the lineups did change over the years, but it really worked. And one of the reasons it worked, I think, is because they were mainly women.
It's a point of difference, but I mean, I was aware, and the band was called Chain of Hearts, and this is pre-Dixie Chicks.
Yeah.
3 beautiful blonde women up the front, all singing, all playing their instruments. There was nothing like that, certainly in Australia, but on the international country music scene, and you were a country music band as such. These things don't last for whatever reason. It's very frustrating, though, to just get so close and then have people's different ideas, different aspirations, different goals get in the way of that. It's a hard thing to deal with.
Look, with Chain of Hearts, I loved that band with a passion. I put all my time and money and emotions into it. I did write a lot of the songs, but we would all write songs for the band. And we did. We worked really, really well. We didn't just make music. We would talk to the audience. Another girl in the band I'd been at acting school with in Melbourne, we were great performers. Our fiddle player had been in the Castanet Club, you know, so that it was kind of like music and cabaret and performance and everything rolled into one. And we had a really good time. We put out a couple of CDs and we were dubbed Too Weird for Tamworth because we were, at that time, no one had really heard of alt country, but that's kind of where we sat. But there did come a time where one of the members decided she wasn't being heard, or her songs weren't being heard enough in the band, and decided to leave. And that really broke my heart. And I was in my mid-30s by this stage, and my only formal training was at acting school. And I had, you know, taken various jobs like, you know, shop assistant or waitressing or whatever to make ends meet. But I could not at that point see a future for myself at all. Everyone expected me to go solo at that stage, and I couldn't do it. I knew how much work it took, and I knew I didn't have what it would take at that point.
It's an enormously daunting thing to start all over again.
Yes.
Because you really have to go back to square one in order to start anew, don't you? Particularly as a musician, because people will instantly associate you with what they've seen you do before. And if you have to move on from that, you really have to break everything down. Yeah, and it was going to take a lot of work and a lot more money, which I didn't have. But I really didn't know what I was going to do next. I thought, well, that's it for me. Just a series of dead-end jobs from now on. Well, there's nothing like an out-of-work singer, but a radio job, really. I know all about that. So why radio? I mean, this path led you to a place at the AFTRS in Sydney, a renowned place for educating people in film, television and radio, which at that point you weren't aware of the fact that they had a radio division. What led you to the doors of the AFTRS in the first place? Well,
in a strange way, the Port Arthur massacre, which was such a traumatic event for everyone who from Tasmania, everyone in Australia, but especially Tasmanians. And I went down because I just needed to be with people who understood what it was like to be from Tasmania and have all your thoughts and dreams and emotions about Tasmania to be ripped aside. It was such an horrific event. When I rang my mum up and said I'm coming down, she said, well, the memorial service is on at Port Arthur. When you're down, do you want to go? And I said, yeah. Now, the ABC was doing an outside broadcast, and I knew the person who was doing that broadcast for the ABC. He had interviewed me several times when I'd been down with bands or performing musically or putting out CDs. And I caught up with him afterwards, and he said, why don't we go and have lunch? So we did. And at lunch, he said, how's the band going? And I said, well, we've broken up, and I have no idea what we're going to do next, what I'm going to do next. And he looked at me and he said, you want to be in radio. And I was gobsmacked. It was like this light bulb went bing on the top of my head. Yeah. Yep. I said, that's so true. I do. But how did you know? I didn't know until you said it. And he said, I know radio and I know you. It's a perfect match. Yep. And from then on, every single door opened. It was just phenomenal, including getting into AFTIS, which was a hard slog in itself. It's a pretty tough school to get into.
Yeah, it's sort of a 7-day-a-week gig, and you getting into radio is really just putting yourself out there and being willing to go wherever the work might occur, being willing to drop at the hat, move at the drop of the hat. Also understanding that your employment is pretty much at the whim of the ratings as well, and they can turn at any stage.
Yes.
You like to have a roller coaster going on, don't you?
When I did end up meditating, there is a lot of Buddhist doctrine, even though it's not a religion at all, the kind of meditation I do. But there's stuff about reincarnation, which I don't believe in for me. Yep. I'm happy for everyone else to have been reincarnated. Great. It doesn't bother me. I'm sure it exists for other people. I hadn't thought it existed for me, though. Yep. And didn't need to, because I'd lived so many different lives.
You were constantly reincarnating anyway, weren't you? On a day-to-day basis almost. Yeah.
So I have. And someone actually once asked me, who was still living in a small town in a very boring job, and he said to me, why does all the great stuff happen to you? Why do these things keep having these adventures? And I said, because I say yes.
That's a standard acting training, isn't it? Say yes to everything, because you never know what might happen when you say yes. But if you say no, you just put a big wall in front of any sort of opportunities that might arise. Yeah,
it's basic training in improvisation.
Yeah. Go with it. Run with it.
Yeah.
After the break, we'll talk about The Boss from Hell, how Mary Lou was able to remain silent for 10 days straight, and writing a book about working for the ABC while working for the ABC. We'll be back.